Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast, LawVu's community for in-house legal professionals. LawVu's mission is to accelerate the evolution of the in-house legal profession, and with this podcast, we showcase modern legal leaders from across the globe. We explore their unique journeys and how they're driving the transformation of our new profession. Join David Lancelot, LawVu's Chief Legal Officer and Executive Vice President of Advocacy, as he explores the cutting edge of in-house legal leadership. This is the Legal Leaders Podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, David Lancelot, the CLO and EVP Advocacy at LawVu. And I'm truly excited to have with me today Dannette Joslyn-Gaul, who is the, get the full title right, General Counsel and VP Ethics, Compliance, and Legal Affairs at the Georgia Institute of Technology, which not everybody in the world will know is actually Georgia Tech, which is probably one of the most famous brands there is. So, Dannette, it's awesome to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, David. I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Dannette, backstory for everybody who's listening. And, I think our connection is pretty extraordinary. I was told by a member of our team here at LawVu, David, you've got to see this annual report, right? And I mean, to everybody out there in in-house legal land, that may not sound like the most exciting start to a conversation or to a relationship, but when I saw the Georgia Tech Legal Annual Report, I was just like, wow, this is so cool. I can't wait to meet the person who leads this legal function, right? And I saw it and I was just like, why is this the way it is? And it took a little digging, but then I realized, I checked out LinkedIn and I was like, I think Dannette was at Pearson when Bjarne Telman was at Pearson. And then, all the lights went on and I was just like, wow, this is going to be really cool. So Dannette has worked for Bjarne Telman. And I am a huge fan of Bjarne's work. Bjarne's been on the show. So when I saw the report, even the org chart, I was just like, this is so great. It's odd, but that's what I get excited about. Right. So, so that's how I first reached out to Dannette. And I was just like, this is a really interesting conversation to have.
And I'm delighted that we have at least one reader of our annual report. That's
yes. So now the one
great.
Listener to this podcast can hear about the one reader of the annual report. My mom just loves annual reports of
so did mine.
Legal function. Yes. So that's how we connected. Dannette is, of course, also a member at NACWA, which is just such a wonderful organization. I'm super excited to have you on the show. And maybe for the audience, and we have a pretty international audience, Dannette, as you know, you could give us a sense for Georgia Tech, the institution, the mission, and the legal function.
I would be delighted. And again, thank you so much for having me. So Georgia Tech is a public institution. I'm surprised to learn that some people don't realize that. So it's a public institution. It's part of the university system of Georgia. So that's an important context for a lot of what we'll be talking about today. But it's really an international institution that has a great deal of connections all over the world. We have a presence all over the world, and we are actually the second largest recipient of federal funds, federal research dollars in the country. The largest that does not have a medical school. So we're proud to say we beat MIT for several years running now in terms of federal funding, federal research dollars that we have. So Georgia Tech is also a very large school. We have a very large online master's program. So we have something like 50 to 60,000 students. It has really grown exponentially over the years. And one of the things that makes it, I think, particularly interesting is just the combination of the public aspect of the work, which is the real mission of and driving for public access for the programming. I mean, we don't pride ourselves in trying to have small elite class sizes. We pride ourselves in trying to be as open as possible and get as many students to benefit from the exceptional academic quality of our institution, with the fact that we are, in fact, such a leading STEM, in particular STEM-based organization. So that's the background of Georgia Tech. We've really benefited a lot also within the state from the fact that we, in the state of Georgia, if you have a B average or better, you can, and you get into Georgia Tech, depending on the nature of your grades, you can go tuition free. So that's really been a boon for Georgia Tech and for the University of Georgia over the last 30 years. The legal function itself is reminded me a lot, which we'll get to, reminded me a lot of what I experienced when I walked into Pearson a number of years ago, which is exceptionally good lawyers, very long-standing lawyers, people who've been here for a very long time, and kind of, around them, surrounding them was this massively expanding institution that was trying to keep up with, it is a STEM-based institution, so it's trying to keep up with the agility of the STEM environment, AI included, but yet the legal team, was trying to sort of compete with that level of complexity and the fast-paced world that was in. And my impression when I walked in was it wasn't quite set up for that, which is really what started my process of trying to transform the group. But exceptional lawyers who had been here for a very long time.
Right on. Yeah. And I think, I'm a Gator. So I went to the
Yes.
University of Florida.
I like you despite it, David.
and to the north is this, basically the capital of the southeast of the United States, Atlanta, Georgia, right? And certainly part of the journey to greatness of that city has been its educational institutions, including, and I don't know if you'd say primarily, but certainly right there in the center of it all has been Georgia Tech. So I don't know if everybody around the world realizes what a technology, engineering, science sort of powerhouse Atlanta is, and particularly Georgia Tech, but it absolutely is. And I think it's really neat to be able to bring that story to a sort of broader world through this particular episode. So I appreciate being here, Dannette. So I think part of the, a really important part of the sort of modernization and transformation story that you bring to the table at this institution, at this sort of, really prime, I think you guys would call it is it R1?
Yes, it's R1.
R1 research, institution does a lot of the research that you read about, every day when something's discovered. It's sort of like at Georgia Tech, somebody did something, right? And part of what you bring is this idea of coming from corporate to education, and bringing these really cutting edge principles of legal leadership with you. And I think maybe if we could go back a little bit to how you picked those up and where you started your journey, and sort of how you took those principles in that you brought with you, I think that would be great to share with the audience.
I'd be delighted. I think I was uniquely situated for Georgia Tech at the moment, which is how I got the role. And I would sort of define my career in really three phases before coming here. I started after law school. I grew up in Atlanta, went to Atlanta public schools. I started my career, short stint litigating, and then I went and worked for the governor's office in Georgia. And I was the governor that I just referenced to really, one of his legacies was to develop the Hope and the Zell Miller scholarships, which really made a big difference in higher education in the state. Had a short stint at Emory, brought back to state government. And then the world changed, and I became a litigator with a small firm for about a dozen years. And after spending that time as a litigator, and after spending my time in state government, I was then recruited to Pearson by someone who I had worked with in state government. Sort of funny little aside, what I didn't realize is I was brought in as sort of a rogue lawyer to Pearson to work for the sales team. Unbeknownst to me, the legal team didn't know I had been hired. And so that caused some consternation. And Bjarne, who was the brand new GC at the time at Pearson, had just started at Pearson a few weeks before I did. Bjarne was still living in Atlanta. He was coming from Coke and had moved up to New York. And so he and I met at a local place, had coffee, and he basically said, "Come work for me. That guy can be your client." And that started a great relationship with Bjarne and a great relationship that I had with Pearson, in that I worked my way through various in-house roles and wound up for the last 5 years as the chief compliance officer globally for Pearson. And so it was in the context, I think, for me at Georgia Tech, the combination of my state experience, litigation experience, and then the in-house ed tech, corporate world, eventually global chief compliance officer for a number of years, that made it kind of a good fit with Georgia Tech at that moment in time. And so when I came to Georgia Tech, I really, it was almost deja vu, because it was very much like the Pearson that I think Bjarne inherited. And so I took a lot of cues and had the benefit of learning some lessons from his experience in doing a transformation at Pearson, which I tried to then apply here at Georgia Tech.
Yeah. And I think, my perspective on that period of time for you guys at Pearson is, from reading the book, Building an Outstanding Legal Team, right? And having it given to me, I've told this story before on this podcast, having it given to me by a recruiter in London who said, I need some leads. And I said, "What's in it for me?" And he said, "Have you read this book, Building an Outstanding Legal Team?" And it really changed the course of my career, because it gave me something finally, that was like, this is best practice in the leadership of an in-house legal function. It's pretty darn niche to write a book about, right? So there wasn't a lot on it. And I have to assume that being at a gigantic publishing business was helpful in getting that book deal. But still, I think it's so sort of fundamental. And this is back in 2017, right? When this book came out. So like having something to go on, right? And I for me, it's just fascinating that it's the story of what you guys did, right? Like what worked in that environment, and that sort of set a very high bar for going forward. What did great look like in the transformation and then leadership management and operations of an in-house?
What if legal intake could handle itself? With LawVu, AI-powered intake workflows triage requests, assess risk and urgency, automate routine work, and route matters to the right team with the right context before a lawyer ever picks them up. So the business gets faster support and legal has more time for strategic work. Visit lawvu.com to see intake management in action.
I mean, it was really the book that I immediately went to when I started here. I had great admiration for our president at Georgia Tech. One of the reasons I came was because I was completely enamored with his vision for the Institute, really had a great deal of respect for the executive leadership team. But I was coming in, they didn't hand me a blueprint of this is what we want the legal function to be. They were, I felt very fortunate to get this role. And so when I walked in the door, I relied very heavily on that to think about how do I want this structure to be? I have a rare opportunity of walking in the door and having a period of time within which I can make some changes.
Yeah.
And so I took that to heart. I went on my listening tours. I thought about what are the strengths and weaknesses of the organization, and really started that way with reliance on Bjarne's book, frankly, to kind of think about what's the best way to approach it. And many aspects of that book, I think, would be universal in any kind of walking in as a general counsel of any institution or any large organization. Some of it's a little more complicated when you're in a public environment, because you do have more restrictions on how you can move things and how quickly you can move. But it really set me up, I think, very nicely to try to get the right stakeholders engaged, to really think about what transformation looks like or should look like, to really think about what I wanted my structure to be or what made sense in this organization. And it was a very trusted companion to really kind of work through those things as I started my own journey here So
I mean, I think you've said you had some previous experience in higher ed, so it wasn't. I mean, I think for anybody who's not in higher ed legal, right, like in another industry, in tech or in whatever it is, higher ed is different. Higher ed is different from, especially in public institutions, but including in private ones in the United States and abroad. It's very different from going into a corporation and just managing things as you normally would. So you had a sense for this was not going to be the same kind of environment that you have been working at Pierce.
yes, correct. Yes, I mean higher education.
And eyes wide open. It wasn't like, oh my gosh.
Yes, and they were not bashful in telling me, expect that you're going to have a bit of a culture shock, and that we are very deliberative in how we do things here. It's a very different sort of model generally, and I had a flavor of that before. And then you combine that with sort of the state restrictions. It's just a very different ballgame from being with a private corporation.
Yes, and that is beneficial in many ways, right?
Yes.
I don't think what we're saying is, just for anybody listening, like we're not saying that's a bad thing. What we're saying is these are institutions that are built with a truly important purpose. There are plenty of companies out there that make an app and go away in a year, and I've worked at them. These are institutions that will be around long after we're gone and doing amazing things for our civilization long gone, right? So I think what I've learned about higher ed professionals is that they are very purpose driven, and they understand that the job is much more about helping the institution along and furthering its great purpose while it's in your hands, knowing that it will be there long afterwards, as opposed to in a corporate environment where, who knows what could happen tomorrow, right? It'd be a big M&A transaction and you're all out, and now it is an AI company, right?
Yes.
It's making one current trend.
Our president describes it as a relay race from
Yes.
president to president, right? Over time.
Exactly.
And that is exactly, you hope, I think we all hope in our roles in these jobs, which take up such a large chunk of our lives, that we're leaving it in a better place than we found it.
Indeed.
And that's really the goal, that you're moving things along reasonably for the benefit of the institution, for the benefit of the students, for the benefit of employees, and setting it up for future success. And that's really what you're that's what it's designed for. That's what you're designed to do.
And in some circumstances, it's a good thing that it can't change too quickly, right? Like when
and people have, I think where people sort of get, trouble's not the right word, but where people get caught up is trying to move too fast. So there's this fine line of trying to progress without being too fast about it, so that you really do need to be deliberative, and you really do need to talk to the right stakeholders, get people engaged. It also makes it smoother to do the transformation.
Right on. So you come into Georgia Tech. What did you see? What were some signs that the transformation and modernization were going to be beneficial to the institution?
So for me, first was that we had a little bit of a hybrid where we had a couple of people who were high-level people on my team who were really embedded with their clients. They were on the leadership teams, and that model was working really well. They loved them. They were really at the ground floor on whatever the client was working on and really understood it. And then we had a whole bunch of people in varying degrees of that. We had large chunks that weren't covered at all. And I also noted that I had an incredible number of direct reports, that I was having a hard time managing this portfolio of people, plus doing my strategic role, plus making sure that we were set up properly. The other thing that I noticed was that we received a lot of incoming requests for work, I guess is the best way to describe it. Literally how you'd find out what your next project would be was through an anonymous, or not anonymous, but kind of an Ask Legal email inbox, as opposed to picking up the phone and saying, I'm going to call Joe today. Who's there wasn't that kind of relationship up and down the chain. Some people had it, a lot of people didn't. And the other thing that I noticed was it was which is not unusual, pretty flat. So there's people who were here for many, many years, great folks, and the people right under them were kind of trying to figure out, how do I grow? How do I get better? Or how do I move forward in my career? And so all of those things were in my mind. We were missing some key things in my view, too many direct reports. Some people were really embedded and really, on point with their units. Some people weren't. Weird ways in which we were getting legal requests. And on the compliance side, I felt we needed to really have a more traditional compliance model that had not yet been built out. So that is what I walked into thinking I wanted to try to figure out how to change. What I didn't know was what does good look, what should it look like for this kind of place? And that's where I started using strategic consulting to help me develop a strategic plan, and then developed an organizational design. So I sat with strategic consulting team to say, I'd like to develop a strategic plan.
And this is internally at Georgia Tech.
Internal, that group, there's a separate strategic consulting kind of group in-house. And I said, I'd like to develop a strategic plan. I'd like for it to be from the ground up. I'd like for everybody on my team to be engaged in the effort. I want to interview stakeholders, internal and external to Georgia Tech. And I want to really figure out what should the priorities of our organization be? And so we did that. And that was maybe a 6-7 month exercise. Had a couple of retreats, full team retreats, where we worked on our mission and our vision, and we really developed what we wanted our unit to look like. And we came to the notion of 3 pillars. The first being people, that to address some of the issues I talked about, really making sure that everybody had a professional development plan. At Georgia Tech, at public institutions, certainly at Georgia Tech, there isn't you don't get bonuses. You're not going to consistently get raises. You're really kind of left up to the Georgia General Assembly in terms of what they do. So folks really need to want to be here. They're not going to get rich, right? So you want to try to figure out how to develop them professionally, and we can, so that they can say they had a fantastic experience for whatever period of time they're here. So first was people, just developing people, making sure they had professional development plans, making sure we could provide some kind of reward for performance, whatever we could figure out how to do, whether it was monetary or not. Then we had a process, which is all around technological improvements, true process improvements, that sort of thing. And then partnerships or collaborations with our client and with the units across Georgia Tech, how to really beef those up so that we can, in fact, be more proactive and less reactive. So it was people, process, and partnership was really what the 3 pillars of our strategic plan wound up being. And I felt really good about that because the entire team was engaged. And it's a 3-year plan. And we try very hard to show our progress along this plan with every staff meeting to really show, look, we committed to ourselves, we would do this, and this is how we're coming along in our progression. So that was how the strategic plan came about.
And you're really reminding me of sort of the book, right? And classic change management practice. Like you can't do a top-down transformation. You need everybody to be on board, especially in an institution as you're describing. You got a lot of purpose-driven people who are all there to do the right thing, and going. Yeah, I think going from good to great is probably a great description of the journey that you've gone on, right? Like things are working, they can be better. How do we get everybody on board with, modernizing how we do things, all for the good of the customer, right? The institution.
Yes.
And then creating a plan in a very, what I would think of best practice way. And I think it's pretty amazing. Of course, you're at Georgia Tech, so you have a strategic planning office, and who doesn't have a strategic planning office? So that's pretty amazing. I'm not sure my alma mater has a strategic planning office. I'd like to think they do, but I'm not sure they do. So that was put in place. Would you call that a vision, or would you call that a sort of transformation plan?
I think it was probably a transformation plan, because from there, And we did a SWOT analysis. So, we all collectively learned and shared it with everybody on the team. This is what everybody thinks we're doing well. And there were a lot of things we're doing really well. We had a lot of strengths. I mean, our people are fantastic, but a lot of opportunities. And so we put this plan together. And then the first step in the plan was, okay, how do we organize ourselves in the best way to accomplish this plan? And that's where I did engage with some outside help to try to help me understand, in light of what you've set yourselves up for, what should your organization look like? And that was challenging. That was the process of determining my leadership team, determining where people would go, and that was challenging for people, even though they had all bought in.
Sure.
Even the concept of the change was very, very hard. And it wasn't that people were going to lose jobs. It was, where am I going to go? Where am I going to be? I've been in this particular role for so many years, It was very stressful for people. And I think that one lesson for me is just probably not fully appreciating the stress associated with, even if there was no doubt they were going to have a job. Just even no longer reporting to me, maybe reporting to someone else was quite a stressful experience for people. So anyway, there were a lot of lessons through that process, but I'm very grateful that I went outside. I think that was the right move to help with the organizational design, which is what we did to sort of think about what our structure would look like. And I'm very pleased with that.
Yeah. And I think I should say for everyone in the audience, like, these are publicly available documents, right? This is one of the amazing things about higher ed. And I wouldn't say this was 100% the same across the planet, but in the United States, if you want to find something out about a higher ed institution's legal function, you can often just go onto their website and see something like an annual plan from Georgia Tech and the org chart. Which, is a beautiful thing to behold. Obviously you've had consultants work on it, but from my perspective, like, one of the hard, I teach a class about in-house leadership, and I've run legal functions. And one of the hardest things to do has been to find that, like, what is best practice, right? Like, is there a place you can find it? And I can tell everybody, this is a place you can find it, right? Dannette has come in with principles from Pearson and Bjorna, built a legal function around best practices, and then published the information publicly so we can all use it, right? So I would strongly recommend taking a look at that annual plan on the Georgia Tech Office of the General Counsel website and the org chart to get a sense for. And I think when I looked at that org chart, the first thing I thought was, this is all about the roles. This is all about the function. This is all about, like, doing the best job for the customer, which is the way it should be, right? And you had a bunch of open roles, right? Like, because you've seen that there are needs, right? There are needs within an organization, a modern organization. I can't remember exactly. I think there was some privacy stuff in there. You mentioned compliance, right? So, recommendation to everybody to have a look at that. And then, so as you've said, this is a 3-year plan, and I think I'm right in saying, like, we're at the end of those 3 years now.
Right? Yeah. We're getting closer. So in some of it was easier than other parts, which is not surprising for anybody who's tried to execute or implement a strategic plan. The organizational redesign, which, just kind of very briefly to summarize what we decided, we had a deputy / chief ethics and compliance officer role, and looking at it, just felt that was too much for one person. So we sort of split those roles. We created a chief ethics and compliance officer role on its own. We created deputies by subject area that really align with the executive leadership of the Institute. We created an entire legal operations function, which I think, I don't know how novel it is at this point in higher education, but certainly when I came into Georgia Tech, I was thinking Pearson, and it was a pretty new concept when we were dealing with legal ops at Pearson. And so putting a legal operations unit together here at Georgia Tech, and some other things, but those were pretty much, really thinking about then my deputies sitting on leadership teams of their respective groups, really being the point person for that particular member of executive leadership, which was how we wound up doing things at Pearson. And so that was what I was thinking about as we were trying to do it. And the that was hard. I mean, that was because again, I think in Bjarne's book, he describes it as slotting people into roles, and you can't slot. There's no such thing as slotting somebody into a public university role. You
Right.
have searches, you have posted positions, lots of search committees, and so what I think we all collectively thought would be not a super short process, but a relatively short process took far longer than expected. And we're finished with that now, which is great. And I think that we are really seeing the rewards of the work, but it took a very long time. So we did that. We've got professional development plans for our employees. We've determined a way to do a reward and recognition program for our employees. So we've done all that well. I feel very good about the partnership and collaboration piece. We're really there proactively with our clients. It's now in the world of AI, working through the process and technology area where I think we're probably behind and where we're trying to catch up. So I still think we have some work to do there, but we've made great progress, I think, generally overall through the strategic plan.
Yeah. And you make me think of from the book, from Bjarne's book, the generalist specialist sort of dichotomy. And of course, legal operations and building the engine room of the legal function. And as soon as I saw the work chart, I was just like, okay, right. This is spot on here, right? Like this is exactly how you would think about best practices in a major corporate environment as well. And I think all of that with the intention of moving from what you're describing as the sort of Ask Legal inbox and I assume some kind of triage system behind that at some point, move from that to more of a, and what, you're not putting people on leadership teams so that they can feel important, right? Like that's not the job. The being on the leadership team allows you to move from reactive to proactive.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And it really, yes. I mean, of course, we all still, no matter how well you design these things, you're still going to get the crisis call. We all will, but it really is a desire to try to push the work back so that you're really there at the beginning of the idea of formation. And I do think that has worked well for us. We've gotten some kudos from people who've come in and said, I haven't had this kind of model before, and I'm really, really, appreciate it and like it, which is great.
Yes, and I think I've spent a little bit of time now in higher ed legal world, and it's just absolutely wonderful place to be, I gotta say. But legal operations is not a widespread functional, subunit. I don't know what you want to call it. In higher ed, it's not widespread in corporate either. I was just at a conference in LA, West Coast, aerospace, food production, all kinds of cool California stuff. Very minimal hands raised in a room of 50 general counsels when you ask.
Yeah.
Legal operations. And, ops does the thing that allows the generalists to have the time, the bandwidth to partner with the business, to partner with the institution in your case, and really look over the horizon and do the proactive work so that you and your team, I always describe it, and I've said this before, describe it as being outside at the holidays, on the phone, looking in at, the Christmas tree or whatever you're looking at on the holidays, while everybody else is having a good time because you've got another thing that's come up in your reactive model, because the reactive model doesn't slow down at the holidays, it speeds up.
Absolutely.
Right? There's more crises on Fridays for some reason.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And from my perspective with legal operations, what I'm hoping that we can accomplish there is also get more data, get more metrics, get a better understanding, because that's also the way to sell sell what you need to the, if I say I need a new position for X, the first question will be, well, how do you know? And so just being able to do that is just part of the muscle memory of the organization is extremely important. And particularly, again, with AI, it's only going to become more critical to try to figure out some of these things from an operational perspective.
Do you think this has something to do with the fact that it is Georgia Tech that that metrics and management principles and a strategic planning office are just part of the DNA of this organization. And they were for a while going like, where's legal? Like, why?
Yes. I mean, I feel like in some respects, I think I was describing it as the cobbler's shoeless children, right? But we do these amazing things at Georgia Tech, unbelievable things. We teach our students cutting edge everything.
Yep.
And so our president has sort of said to us from an administrative perspective, I expect you to be the same. I
Yep.
want you all to be right there. I mean, he has had specific conversations with me saying, you need to learn these tools. You need to, your team should be using them. We should all be embracing and using these because, we're certainly teaching our students to, whether they're business people, business students, or they're, in liberal arts, or they are, in the School of Computing. All of them need to know this stuff, and we
Sure.
should too. So we've all taken that to heart, and I do think that's part of it is there is an expectation and an appreciation for these things and ways that other schools, I can't speak for other schools, but certainly an appreciation for them here.
Yeah.
And it would be it will be the logical question. Okay, in the light of AI, Dannette, why do you need X?
Yes.
I've got to be able to respond to that.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I think, that there's a widespread, including in, and particularly in corporate legal functions at the moment, a widespread push by the business, right? For a long time, it was in-house lawyers at events talking about, we should modernize, we can do things differently. I wish our business would understand. I wish our business would want us to be partners in the way we want to be partners. I think that the die has turned now, and where we've passed the tipping point now, where the business is saying, we need people like Dannette to come in and run this function, right? And transform this function and modernize it. I think that has something to do with the business leaders and institutional leaders having seen that model elsewhere and going, I want that, right? I know that's possible now. I also think it has something to do with headhunters and recruiters, who have a broader perspective, I think, seeing that model. But certainly the die has changed and the point has tipped. And here we are in a world where pretty much everybody who's leading a legal function is now looking at, like, how can I modernize and transform and implement, leadership management, operations, technology, et cetera, to accelerate and to move from being a reactive to a proactive function.
Yes. I mean, the world has just gotten too complex. And so, and the regulatory requirements are too complex. So whatever we can do to create efficiencies and to become more proactive is in our best interest. And so, yeah, that's definitely a guiding principle.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you being on the show, Dannette.
Thank you so much, David. It's been wonderful.
I mean, the connections here are to me pretty extraordinary, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Me too.
Hopefully soon. I appreciate everybody joining us today on the Legal Leaders Podcast. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you on the next show. Thanks.
Thank you.